No, I love this.
He likes this better. He likes, you want me down here? That's great.
Okay.
He messed it all up.
No,
Good morning.
We got explicit directions on how to come out, but it's really different when you get out here and see all this.
I had Elaine.
What a great gathering. Wow.
I had Elaine appropriately on the far right.
CPAC just continues to get better. And as you know, we have two of the finest cabinet officers in the history of this nation with us this morning, Secretary of Energy Rick Perry and Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're very limited in our time together this morning, Madam Secretary and Mr. Secretary, so let's get right to it. In a lightning round fashion, let's talk about the economy. What's the current state of the United States economy?
Well, I'll give you a phrase. It's stronger than garlic.
A few extra words, but I like that.
Best than it's been in a long time.
So to the serious part of the conversation, it didn't just happen. What have been the things that have made the economy so strong, so vibrant, and continuing to grow?
Well, obviously the tax bill that was passed. And I think there's this mentality out there, small businessmen and women. We always tell people, when I was back in my home state of Texas and we were doing economic development, that capital goes where it's welcome. The Trump administration has clearly sent the message all across the country and around the globe that your capital is welcome in America. So you're seeing people have this concept, this idea, this feeling that we can risk our capital, we can put that out there, and because of the regulatory climate, which you've addressed, Secretary, over at the Department of Transportation, removing those permitting hurdles and all of that. So taxes, regulation, and just the mentality that you can risk your capital, have a chance to have a return on the investment. That's what President Trump and his administration's done.
Absolutely. In 2009, with the onset of the recession, it was fairly deep. And generally speaking, when the economic times go into a doldrum that deeply, the economy bounces back pretty quickly. And in that particular case, it didn't come back quickly. In fact, the economy took a long time to come back because of the regulatory burdens that were imposed on the economy by the previous administration that had an actual serious impact on job creation.
Yep.
Yeah, we had a 1.5% economic growth the last year of the Obama administration. How'd we do the first year of the Trump administration? I mean, it's remarkable what tax reform and regulatory reform can do. Both of you have been recognized as leaders in regulatory reform, and regulation, after all, is a tax.
Absolutely.
So what have been the things that you specifically have done, and what's left on the agenda?
Well, obviously, the LNG growth, we're now into 34 countries on 5 continents that American LNG is going into. So making that regulatory climate, a hurdle that is easier to cross. People, here's the rules. We need to have rules and what have you, but here are the rules. Here's your permit. It ought to be that easy. I will say one thing that has slowed us up a little bit is getting the nominations. Our friends on the Democrat side have not been quite as helpful as we might like for them to be from the standpoint of getting our nominations through. FERC still has a couple of openings on it that could be really important. You get those done, billions of dollars worth of projects are going to get approved at FERC that will allow our natural resources to be moved all around the world.
Hey, I'd like to just pick up on that point, because I don't know how many of you know that there's not one department in the whole federal government that is fully staffed up in terms of non-career leadership.
We've been there 2 years.
Yeah, and at the Labor Department, where I was once Secretary of Labor, Secretary Acosta has 7 nominees that are on the Senate floor. I have 4 nominees. It's not the Senate Majority Leader's fault. I want to make that very clear.
Or you'll chat with him.
There might be a little pillow talk going on there about nominations.
No, it's not his fault. In fact, it is the deliberate policy of the Senate Minority Leader to slow up the nominations of this administration by invoking cloture at every single step of the nominations process on the floor, so that if you are, if you're a nominee, you have to go through 30 hours of cloture to get your nomination on the floor, and then 30 hours of cloture for your nomination to be voted upon. So that is an incredible amount of time that has to be spent on every single nominee, which is why there's such a backlog of more than 180 nominations for this administration.
On the regulatory side, what's left to be done, and how big a role is innovation going to play in resolving the problems that regulation has been designed to take care of previously?
Well, hopefully there's not going to be a substantial amount of work that needs to be done from the standpoint of removing regulations. There'll still be some, and certainly we won't get them all done. But from the standpoint of innovation, and I'm not going to talk about innovation from the sense of what it's going to do on the regulatory front. What I'm more interested in, the Department of Energy is, I tell people, I said, look, the DOE ought to stand for the Department of Everything. I mean, we're involved in so many things. Sure, the energy industry, whether it's fossil fuels, whether it's renewables, whether it's the nuclear side of things, hydro, all of those types of things that we're working on and we're making good progress on, whether it's in advanced nuclear reactors and continuing to push America forward as a leader in the civil nuclear energy side of things. But we're doing things on the medical front that the vast majority of the people of America have no idea would be involved in. And let me give you one example. In the area of traumatic brain injury, we've been working for the last 2 years and putting some programs together. Somebody went, wait, whoa, what are you over DOE being involved with traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress for? Because we operate 5 of the 10 fastest supercomputers in the world at the department through our national labs. So these supercomputers are giving us the ability, working with some other folks like the University of California, San Francisco, and their School of Neuroscience, entrees into being able to manage information and put data in and get answers back that we've never been able to do before. Jeffrey Manley, neurosurgeon at the university, has said that he's finding more answers on brain science in the last 10 months than he has in the last 10 years. This is the type of innovation that American taxpayers want to see with their dollars. For instance, he's come up with a device about the size of an iPad, a little bit thicker. Take 1 drop of blood, put it on a slide, put it in the side of this device, and they're able to tell whether or not that patient has been concussed within 10 minutes. You think about the impact that has for traumatic brain injury in an automobile accident, on the battlefield. A soccer mom whose child has been concussed and they're really worried about, is my child going to be affected long term here? Make sure I send them to the right hospital to get the right treatment. That's the type of innovation that you're seeing at the Department of Energy using some of our supercomputing capacity. So, I'm excited about the future of what's happening out there. This administration is pushing that type of technology forward, technology that's showing real results for the taxpayers of this country.
And Secretary Chao, what do things look like at transportation? Great.
Well, the president actually is, started this whole thing by coming out very early, in early February 2017, asking that for every new regulation that is implemented or promulgated, that there will be 2 regulations that would be withdrawn. So just in the Department of Transportation alone, in the previous administration, more than $3 billion annually in increased regulatory costs came out of the department. And this is just one department out of the whole federal government. So you can imagine the regulatory burden that was being imposed on our economy. So the president comes in, and in February he issues this new EO, which requires withdraw 2 regulations for every one. I'm very pleased to say that in a very responsible way, the Department of Transportation has withdrawn 46 regulatory actions, and we have
how many yet to go?
We're looking at 100 more.
100 more.
So on the,
Hold
on the, doesn't it scare you that there's so many? And we do it in a very responsible way, of unnecessary burdensome regulations. On the innovation front, 6 years ago, actually 3 years ago, America was number 6 in the whole commercial space sector in the world. This is before the president came into office. And in the last 3 years, we've made incredible strides. In the last 2 years, we've made incredible strides, where America is now, once again, number 1 in the commercial space launch sector.
Secretary Perry, one of the things that the good Lord has blessed us with is trillions of cubic feet of natural gas beneath our feet. As a Pennsylvanian, I'm very proud of the fact that we just became the number 2 producer of natural gas in the United States. I can't quite recall who's number 1, but somewhere down there on the Mexican border, and I heard they had a hell of a governor some years ago. But meanwhile, in other parts of the United States, most notably in the Northeast, there are utilities cutting off service or not extending service because there's no gas. Yeah. We had Russian gas coming into Boston instead of U.S. gas. What can be done about that?
Yeah, let me address the innovation side of 15 years ago, there were people telling us that we had found all the natural resources, peak oil, remember that speech? And because of American innovation, because the private sector was not strangled, a guy by the name of George Mitchell, who came up with the concept of hydraulic fracturing, and then working with some national labs back in the early to mid 2000s, they came up with the ability to keep the polycarbonate bit on the drilling bits, and so you had the directional drilling. You put those two together, and that's been the innovation that's allowed this extraordinary innovation. The sad thing is that not all Americans are getting to enjoy that because of some boneheaded political decisions that are made from time to time. Sorry, my word. In this case, New York, which won't allow those pipelines to transverse. You know, there's 2 Uticas. There's a Utica, New York, and there's a Utica, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And you go to Pennsylvania, northern Pennsylvania, which I think you know a little bit about, and there's a real renaissance going on there because they have allowed for the development of their natural resources, the jobs that have been created, all of the quality of life that comes with that. Plus, they're delivering to the American people a clean burning fuel, lowering the emissions from the older inefficient plants we had. Cross the border into New York, and it may look like old-time poverty that we've, hoped we had gotten past in this country. But because of policies that are being put in place in Albany, Albany, New York, those citizens, and jeopardizing one of the most important financial centers in the world. If we have a polar vortex that comes into this country, and New York does not have the diversity of power to be able to keep the power on. I mean, you get a 10-day, 2-week cold snap where it is really, really cold. And you could see the loss of power to one of the most populated cities in the world, the chaos that would ensue. The President of the United States, he understands that we can't afford that we have to have a diversity of supply. That's the reason he wants to see clean CCU type coal technology, nuclear technology in place, our natural gas being able to be delivered anywhere in this country, nuclear power. All of that's going to be needed in the future, and these states that limit that because of their political concerns jeopardize their future of their citizens, not just economically, but literally, I will suggest, jeopardizing their lives.
And Secretary Chao, I think we all recognize that infrastructure is so vitally important to both store and transport the energy supply. So, for example, LNG,
yes.
So vitally significant. What is your department doing to move that forward and make those supplies readily available?
Well, like so many of these federal departments, they have such jurisdiction. So the Department of Transportation actually regulates safety, certifies the safety of the pipelines. And so we want to make this a process whereby we are facilitating the energy independence of America. So we have actually signed and worked very closely with FERC, with Chairman Neil Chatterjee, because they don't have enough commissioners, on helping to reform the permitting process so that it is not so onerous and incomprehensible at points, with the whole emphasis on common sense, safe delivery of LNG through pipelines.
Very good. And meanwhile, out on the left coast, Governor Newsom has announced that the People's Republic, the state of California, is canceling their high-speed rail project, but they're not going to return the federal funds that have been involved there. What are you prepared to do about that?
You know, you'd be amazed. So many of these contracts were signed on January 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and the morning of 2017. So these are contracts which we cannot abrogate. But this particular contract was for a high-speed rail between Los Angeles and San Francisco, with spurs going to Sacramento and San Diego. It was originally supposed to cost $40 billion. What they did was decrease the footprint, but then the cost mushroomed to $77 billion. So they've decided to decrease the footprint again. So now the only path that this high-speed rail goes through is between Merced and Bakersfield. For those of you who come from California, those are two relatively small rural communities. So they have substantially changed the terms and conditions of this contract. We have still $929 million, which we have yet to give, obviously, with the project so radically different than what was proposed to us initially. We will not be giving the $929 million out.
Go ahead, finish up.
And on the $2.5 billion that has already been given with, sadly, very little results, we have given the state of California time until March 5th to make their case, because we are very conscious about the process. But clearly, this is a classic example of bait and switch. And on behalf of the American people and our concern with doing our fiduciary responsibility, we have a right to ask for that $2.5 billion back as well.
And Secretary Perry, I know you wanted to make a comment about infrastructure development and how vitally important that is, following up on Secretary Chao's remarks about transportation and LNG in particular.
You know, even though there are some states that are making some bad decisions, the bulk of this country is very pro-U.S. energy, pro-U.S. Resources being not only moved into the United States to the various markets, but also for export reasons. The United States is now the #1 oil and gas producing country in the world. In the next 2 years, we will see a 150% increase in our natural gas production. The bulk of that will be leaving the shores of the United States for markets around the world. What that allows us to do from a geopolitical standpoint can't be overstated. The idea that the United States can go to Central Europe and share with the Central European citizens that they no longer have to be put in a position of being held hostage by Russian gas. The Ukrainians will share with you that the Russians will cut your gas off from time to time to send a message. So the United States is in a position like they've never been in before from the standpoint of being able to supply a form of energy that not only helps them lower the emissions, but also to give them the security from the standpoint of being held hostage by countries that don't necessarily have their best interest in mind.
Ladies
Great
and gentlemen, would you please join me in thanking Secretary Elaine Chao
Thank
and
you all.
Secretary Rick Perry for their leadership, for their commitment, and for doing each day those things which are making America great.
And
Thank
thank
you,
you,
Charlie.
Charlie.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Follow him.